Jim Gray was born in 1958 in the working-class district of East Belfast, Northern Ireland, where tensions between Protestant Loyalists and Catholic nationalists had been escalating for decades. The area was known for its strong unionist sentiments, with a significant portion of the population being fiercely loyal to the United Kingdom and opposing Irish republicanism. Gray's childhood was shaped by these local dynamics, which would later fuel his involvement in the turbulent world of paramilitarism. His family was rooted in the Protestant working class, and while his father, James, worked hard to support the family, they were by no means wealthy. His mother, Elizabeth, managed the household, and Jim had one sister, Elizabeth, who, though an important part of his early life, did not share in his later rise to infamy. Jim's family life was simple, and though they weren't rich, they were respected members of their community. Growing up in East Belfast was challenging for Jim, given the larger political landscape. By the time he reached his teenage years, the Troubles, a violent and protracted conflict between Catholic Republicans seeking a united Ireland and Protestant Loyalists wanting to remain part of the United Kingdom, were in full swing. These years shaped his views and likely steered him toward a path of involvement in local gangs, and eventually the UDA. Jim's early life was marked by involvement in petty crime, typical for many youths living in working-class areas during the height of the Troubles. As a teenager, Jim spent his time in and around the streets of East Belfast, engaged in activities that ranged from theft to vandalism. These activities became more frequent as the allure of easy money, power, and influence drew him deeper into the criminal underworld. The tartan gangs, made up of Loyalist youths, were a prominent part of life in these neighborhoods, often aligned with the UDA. Jim's involvement with these gangs helped him establish connections with key figures in the Loyalist paramilitary groups. As the violence of the Troubles escalated, Jim became more deeply entrenched in the criminal networks that operated not just for political reasons, but for financial gain. His early involvement in petty crime laid the foundation for his eventual rise in the UDA, as he soon began to associate with more powerful and dangerous figures within the group. In the early 1980s, Jim Gray found his way into the ranks of the UDA, a paramilitary group formed to defend the Protestant community in Northern Ireland. The UDA was part of a broader Loyalist movement that saw itself as a counterforce to the growing power of the IRA, the militant organization fighting for Irish independence. By this point, the UDA had become heavily involved in paramilitary activities, including bombings, shootings, and assassinations targeting Catholic civilians and Republican activists. The UDA was deeply entrenched in the local communities, and its influence in places like East Belfast was particularly strong. Gray, with his growing criminal network and desire for power, quickly rose through the ranks of the UDA, aligning himself with the East Belfast Brigade. By the early 1990s, Jim Gray had become the brigadier of the East Belfast Brigade, one of the most powerful factions within the UDA. As a leader, he demonstrated a flair for the dramatic, adopting the persona of a flashy, self-assured individual. His appearance, brightly colored clothing, gold chains, and his trademark dyed blonde hair earned him the nickname Doris Day. He was often referred to as the Brigadier of Bling, a nod to his ostentatious style and apparent disregard for the more secretive aspects of paramilitary life. Under Gray's leadership, the East Belfast Brigade grew in both influence and wealth. He expanded their criminal activities beyond the traditional violence associated with paramilitary groups, delving into the worlds of extortion, money laundering, and drug trafficking. His control over bars, clubs, and other businesses in East Belfast allowed him to launder money and launder the profits from his illicit operations, which contributed to his growing wealth. His success also led to an increase in his notoriety, attracting both admiration from his followers and attention from law enforcement. The expansion of the East Belfast Brigade's operations under Gray was not limited to petty crime. Jim Gray's leadership style was aggressive and strategic, enabling him to establish a solid criminal empire. He was known to personally oversee the operations in the bars he owned and used them as fronts for his illicit dealings, including the distribution of cocaine, a lucrative trade at the time. These operations were not just criminal in nature, they were also deeply intertwined with the political loyalties of the local communities, which meant that Gray and his associates could operate with a level of impunity. Jim Gray's wealth grew exponentially as his criminal activities flourished. His lavish lifestyle became the subject of gossip in East Belfast, where he flaunted his success with expensive cars, luxury items, and a showy public persona. His image as a man of the people also helped maintain his popularity, especially among the Loyalist community in East Belfast, where many saw him as a champion of their cause. For some, he was a hero, someone who fought for their interests. For others, he was a symbol of everything wrong with the UDA and its growing influence in the criminal underworld. As Jim Gray's power and influence grew, so did tensions within the UDA itself. The organization was plagued by internal divisions, and by the early 2000s, Gray had become a divisive figure. While some viewed him as a capable leader who was ensuring the UDA's success, others believed he was acting outside of the organization's official structures, building his own personal empire. In 2005, Jim Gray's involvement in the UDA came to an abrupt end. He was expelled from the organization after accusations of treason surfaced. It was alleged that Gray was operating independently, seeking to further his own personal interests at the expense of the broader Loyalist cause. Furthermore, there were suspicions that Gray had been passing information to the authorities, particularly the Special Branch, which allegedly made him a police informant. The UDA leadership could not tolerate these allegations, and as a result, Gray was expelled. His expulsion marked a dramatic fall from grace, and his criminal empire began to unravel. Gray's former allies turned against him, and he became a target for retribution from other factions within the UDA. The split within the Loyalist community deepened, as Jim Gray's name was associated with betrayal and corruption. Following his expulsion, Jim Gray found himself facing legal challenges. In April 2005, he was arrested while driving his car in East Belfast, with a large sum of money found in his possession. This discovery led to charges of money laundering and suspicions of his involvement in organized crime, including drug trafficking. Police believed that the money was the proceeds of Gray's extensive criminal activities. Over the next several months, police conducted raids on his properties and uncovered thousands of documents detailing his illicit operations. These documents implicated Gray in a vast criminal network that spanned beyond East Belfast. Although he was released on bail, his reputation continued to deteriorate, and his criminal enterprises were under increasing scrutiny from law enforcement. Jim Gray's life came to a violent and tragic end on October 4, 2005. He was shot and killed in his home in East Belfast, in what was likely a targeted assassination. While the exact motives behind his murder remain unclear, it is widely believed that Gray's death was the result of internal UDA feuds and the growing power struggles within Loyalist paramilitary groups. His expulsion from the UDA and the accusations of him being a police informant had put a target on his back, and his violent death reflected the perilous nature of his lifestyle. Gray's murder was one of many violent events that marked the final years of the Troubles. His death also underscored the dangers of the Loyalist paramilitary world, where betrayal, power struggles, and criminal activity could often lead to brutal consequences. Jim Gray's murder sent shockwaves through East Belfast and the wider Loyalist community. Jim Gray's life was marked by contradictions. On one hand, he was a symbol of the rise of a new, more criminally minded generation of Loyalist leaders. On the other, his life story highlighted the destructive nature of a life lived in the shadow of violence, corruption, and betrayal. His legacy is complex. Some view him as a victim of his circumstances, a man who was manipulated by the forces around him, while others see him as a symbol of the excesses and dangers of paramilitarism. For many in East Belfast, Jim Gray was a larger-than-life figure, a man who had risen from humble beginnings to control a vast criminal network. His death marked the end of an era in Loyalist paramilitary politics, but his legacy continues to shape the narrative of the Troubles. Jim Gray's life was a testament to the perils of ambition and the dark allure of power. His rise from a working-class boy with dreams of becoming a golfer to a notorious UDA brigadier was a journey defined by crime, violence, and betrayal. His death, a violent and tragic end to his story, serves as a stark reminder of the risks involved in the criminal and paramilitary world. While his legacy is controversial, it is an integral part of the history of Northern Ireland and the tumultuous period of the Troubles. That is it for our video today. Like and subscribe and comment below what you think of Jim Gray, and I will see you on the next video.